Welcome back to episode 8 of Relationships Through the Looking Glass. As we start going further down into our topics, we are excited to state that we are now collaborating with other podcasters in the industry, specifically Black podcasters, to talk about relationships and how males, women see things differently and how that impacts relationships in the whole. So I'm super excited to get that going. The first episode will be coming up this weekend, so look out for it. Today's episode is going to be a little different. No guest, just me and you, and we're going to have story time. In this story, we're going to talk about Alice and the Big Bad Wolf. So sit back, grab something to sip on, and let's dig deep into what happens when boundaries are not held and when boundaries aren't respected and the aftermath that brings. Now, this won't be a long story, probably just 30 minutes, but hopefully the details of the story will be able to help some other people who might find themselves in the same situation Alice did, and allow them to prevent some of the same mistakes she made so they won't have to go through the experience that she did. So, let's get started. So I could start the story off with the typical once upon a time, but I don't want to do that. Let's start it off with there was a chick named Alice, and she had a lot on her plate, a lot of things to do, running back and forth over the mountains and through the woods, right? To grandmother's house she went, bringing apples and supplies and anything that was needed to keep her family safe. She did most of this on her own, and that really didn't bother her. Alice was a loner, so doing things by herself really was not a big deal to her. Her only goal was to make sure her family was provided for and that whatever task she had to do was completed. So the day when she was walking in the forest alone and she saw off in the distance somebody who looked familiar, but she wasn't quite sure. So as he got closer and closer, she started to recognize who it was. It's somebody that she knew a long time ago, and they were friends. So, they struck out a conversation, got to kind of know each other a little bit more, and he decided, hey, you don't have to do all this walking by yourself. I'll walk with you. So she reluctantly agreed and said, you know what? He's safe. I know him. It's not like he's a stranger, so sure, let's go. Not a problem. So as they walked, they got to know each other better, and she started to realize that, you know what, maybe having somebody to share this journey with isn't so bad, and she kind of liked it. They talked about so many things. They talked about the stars in the sky. They talked about the meaning of life. They would look up at owls in the tree. She would always ask, I wonder what the owl's view is from that height. And they would chuckle about inside jokes they had, and she would describe how unicorns were so obnoxious, but for some reason she liked them because she felt, in the grand scheme of things, she could be an awesome unicorn. And he always talks about, he felt he was sly as a fox. And she agreed. So as they made their inside jokes, as they got to know each other more, the journey seemed so much easier than it was before for Alice. Then one day, the big bad wolf looked down and said, hey, that's a really nice basket of apples you got there. How about we have some? Alice wasn't sure about that because she knew she had to save the apples for her destination. And she was like, well, we just kind of started the walk. We probably need to save these. It's probably not a good idea. So he was like, okay, whatever you say, let's keep walking. So they kept walking, they kept talking. They would talk about different adventures they wanted to go on and different experiences that they've had in the past. And she got to feel more and more safe with him. She hadn't laughed so much in her whole entire life, to where she now felt that his absence would be felt much greater, and she would much rather him walk with her long term. And he seemed to be cool with it. He didn't seem to be going anywhere or had any other plans but to walk on this journey. So he would talk about distant places and how many different things that they could do together. And all of these things sounded exciting to Alice, because Alice had a great imagination. But one thing that would get her into trouble was that imagination would create people for her. These people weren't necessarily there. Not saying Alice was crazy. It's more of, in her past, she would come into relationships on this journey of hers. And even though there were a lot of signs that this person wasn't who she thought they were, she would go with it anyway, because she had made a false persona in her head than the realistic example who was standing right beside her. So when she was starting to feel all of these good feelings, she started to wonder, is that what she's doing now? Am I making this person up? You know? Is this person really as great as he appears to be? But she didn't want to self-sabotage, because she was enjoying the experience. She was enjoying the walk. So as they continue to walk, he looks at the basket again and says, "Hey, I think we've walked long enough. Let's break out those apples." Alice again says, "I don't think it's the right time. You know, we still have a lot of walking to do." So he was like, "All right, whatever you say, whatever makes you happy, Alice." But on the journey, he started asking questions like, "Hey, where do you live? Hey, who else is a part of the Alice tribe? You know, I want to meet these people." And she was like, "Well, I kind of keep people away from where I stay and, you know, my tribe, because I want to keep them safe." And he looks at her and flashes that smile again. "Who could be safer than me? You know me." And she agreed. She was like, "I do know you, and you are safe. You make me feel safe. Sure, I'll take you to where I stay. I'll let you meet the most important people in my life and let them bond with you as well. Because if you make me feel this safe and I enjoy you this much, I'm sure they'll enjoy you as well." And that's what she did. All to the shock and amazement of her tribe and her people, because she had never brought anybody to the peacefulness of her home. So he stayed there, enjoyed the experience, and then they decided to keep walking. So once they left her home and said their goodbyes, they asked, "Where are you heading off to?" "Well, I don't know," Alice said. "I'm following him." And they said, "Well, be careful. Do you trust him?" And her response was, "More than anything." So as they continue to go, he says, "Hey, I've seen where you live. You trust me enough for me to meet your tribe people? Like, what about some apples?" And at that moment, she was like, "You know what? You're right. I guess it's okay. I don't really agree, but what's the worst that could happen?" So they gobble up the apples, all of the apples in the basket. She asks him, "Where are we headed off to?" And he said, "It's a place called Wonderland. It's a place where everything that you've ever felt that you needed in a relationship is there. The attention, the love, the responsiveness, everything that you've ever thought of that you needed would be here. And Alice started to think, oh, this guy, this has to be too good. This is too good to be true. Like, he says all the right things. He does all the right things. You know, something's up. But she really did not want to self-sabotage and feel like everything she did was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was like, I just need to enjoy the journey and stop waiting or looking for something bad to happen. But as she would say that, she would start to notice little things that appeared to be more wolf-like than safe friend, knight in shining armor like. But she would start to explain that away as her being traumatized from previous relationships. So she followed him into Wonderland. And in the beginning, everything was just as he said. So she began to trust him even more, to the point where she took all of her protective armor off that she wore under her cape, because she felt the safest with him and felt she could now finally lay it down because there was no need for her to wear it anymore. She showed him parts of her personality and shared stories about herself that she told no one. But the longer they stayed in Wonderland, she started to notice more and more things. The wolf-like features started to be more pronounced. Wolf-like attitudes and behaviors started to seep out, to the point where she started to get concerned, to where this person doesn't really seem to be the individual that she bumped into earlier on in the journey. But she explained it away, and she proceeded to go further into Wonderland. Because you see, her concern of making things up in her head and looking for something negative, wanting to explain all those away because she felt safe and she believed that this was something that was authentic and could be trusted. So when she woke up one morning and realized she was by herself, she started to call out for him. So she ran from one side of Wonderland to the other side. Up trees, down trees. Where did he go? He was completely gone. And then she looked and realized that the apples were gone as well. Her armor was gone as well. Everything that she had to keep her safe and nurtured were all gone. He took them. He took it all. So she was left in the middle of a place she had never been and was expected to get home. And what made it so difficult was she didn't pay attention to the path that he brought her down, because she was so trusting and having faith in that this was the right thing to do. She knew she had to get home because people depended on her, people needed her, but she didn't know how to do it. She didn't know which direction to go. And the one thing she really felt or started to realize was the pain from being vulnerable with the wrong person. What it feels like. It hurt. It was a situation where she let down her boundaries and changed her way of thinking and way of being to be something for somebody else. And then he left her. He left her to find her way back by herself. Now, some of you might be asking, well, it's kind of a situation where we want to put the blame on Alice, right? Some of you are thinking that. She didn't have to give him her apples. She didn't have to trust him, even though she knew him. She didn't have to follow him into a location or a destination she didn't know where she was heading. She should have asked more questions. Yeah, those are all potentially true. But then there has to be some responsibility or accountability for the wolf. And even though he didn't present to her as the wolf, he didn't present a narrative to make it look like he was the bad guy. In her experience, that's what he was. And when the bad guy is clothed as the good guy, damage can happen. So where's Alice now, you might ask? She's still trying to find her way home. She still hurts. She has good days, she has bad days, but she's still lost. She still questions every decision that she made. But she knows she'll make it sooner or later. She'll find where she's supposed to be and get to the destination and then take all of the lessons that she learned so she doesn't make the same mistakes again. And what about the wolf, you might ask? Where did he run off to? Well, sometimes you hear him howling at night when the moon is full. And every time she hears any sign of him, it hurts. Anytime she has any type of flashback or memory, it hurts. And that's one thing about healing. It's never a straight line, is it? Some days are really, really good, and some days are really, really bad. Some days you question everything that you did from day one, and then some days you put the blame on the other person and let them carry the burden. But the takeaway from the story is things happen, right? But one thing that you have to stand fast on are your boundaries. What are your values? What's your value systems? What are your non-negotiables? What are things that you need to keep yourself safe? Because it's not about how long you've known somebody that should excuse their poor behavior. It's not about people going through circumstances that should allow you to become victim to be treated poorly. It's more about what you will allow and accept before you decide to move forward with somebody on your journey. It's more about your vulnerability in who you allow to have access to you at that level. Everybody does not need to have access to your energy, to your vulnerability, to your story. It's something that's so intimate to yourself that you have to protect. Because when you're vulnerable with the wrong person or at the wrong time, drastic things can happen. The person who is the rock for so many other people now look around and realize that they don't have a rock for themselves. So they're left to process. They're left to think over and over and relive experiences over and over again as they try to heal their heart. And one thing I do know is heartbreak hurts. It's not something that's just a fairy tale, right? It's a real thing. And just because people appear to be extremely strong and have this strong exterior, that doesn't mean when people do bad things to these individuals that it doesn't hurt. So, takeaway of the story for Storytime is watch out for the big bad wolves, you know? Watch out for the wolves in sheep clothing. Trust your instincts. Hold your boundaries. And sometimes it's okay to question, because sometimes our intuition tells us things that our brain and our heart doesn't want to realize. Because trying to heal when you're hurting and when trust has been broken and when your vulnerability has been violated can take a very long time. And it might take a very long time for Alice to find her way back home. So, hopefully, some of the lessons in that story can help some other individuals who might be in the same situation or close or similar, or have been questioning, should I do this or should I not do this? If it's your boundary and it's your value system, you hold on to that. Don't allow a relationship, don't allow a pretty smile, don't allow laughter and contentment steer you away from who you are. Because the moment you choose something other than yourself is the moment you start going down the big bad wolf's road. And you might end up lost in the destination where you have to fight your way back and find your way home alone. So that concludes story time. And hopefully there are lessons within the story that can be helpful to someone who might be listening or in their own experience where they've been questioning if they should do something or if they should not, where they're questioning if something feels too good to be true, is it? Or if they're questioning, is this the right thing to be doing? Listen to your intuition. A lot of times the brain, sometimes the heart, it gets really, really loud. But your soul is what you should listen to and follow. All right? So, like I mentioned before, we're going to start having some really explosive and dynamic content coming as it relates to relationships. There might be other story times thrown on in there when I run up against a circumstance or a situation that I feel a story might benefit, So hopefully this wasn't too long. I was trying to make it 30 minutes. I don't know if I got there or I went a little bit over. But let me know if this resonates or somebody can talk about an experience where they were vulnerable with the wrong person and the amount of healing and the length of time it took to find yourself. All right, you guys take care. You stay safe. Thanks for listening.